Okay, so World War II is over now, and we've defeated the Nazis with the help of the Soviet Union. And after the war's over, it's going to be a lot different than the post World War I era. This is an instance where the United States is going to step up and take a major role in world leadership. You also have the Soviet Union uh, pitching in and providing some leadership in a different type of way. So we want to talk about this. After World War II is over, the United States and the Soviet Union, they worked together to defeat the Nazis because they're a threat to Europe. But the United States, much like Rocky Balboa, doesn't really trust the Soviet Union and, say, an Ivan Drago type character. There's a lot of reasons for bad blood. Let's talk about reasons why the United States doesn't really trust the Soviet Union fully. One of the reasons why is they have no faith in Joseph Stalin, especially because of the Great Purge. The United States and other countries are very aware of the fact that Joseph Stalin killed off millions of his own people. That's a huge reason not to trust him. Another reason for mistrust of the Soviet Union is those guys signed a non aggression pact with Hitler prior to World War II. Stalin was stupidly trusting of the one person in the universe everybody knows you can't trust. And so the United States looks at them pretty skeptically. They also see a problem in terms of their ideology. You have the United States, which is a capitalist country. They are a democracy. And you have the Soviet Union, which believes in socialism moving towards communism. These are two very different countries. So the United States, listen, they're not only afraid of the ideology, but they're also afraid, remember, communism promotes the goal of worldwide revolution. And so that causes some concern. The United States doesn't really fully trust them. But the Soviet Union has reasons for mistrust of its own. The United States never recognized the Soviet Union as an official nation till a decade and a half after the Soviet Union officially formed and the Bolshevik Revolution occurred. So, the Soviet Union's a little bit annoyed. There's another big reason for mistrust, too. The Soviet Union has seen the destructive power of the United States with the atomic bombs. That is going to be a real reason for concern because it gives the United States a little bit more leverage and power in world affairs. The Soviet Union is also a little bit skeptical because they look at the United States as slow to get involved in World War II. They didn't sacrifice nearly as much during the war as the Soviet Union. Remember, we talked about the Soviet Union probably loses more than 20 million people in World War II. And the United States, it's not small, but we lost about 380,000, give or take a few. So the Soviet Union says, listen, we're in a tough spot. Plus, they know that the ideological differences mean that these two countries are at odds with one another. All right, so they don't really trust each other, and they have different goals and a different outlook for the future. Let's start with the Soviet Union and what they want to do with Eastern Europe. Remember, the Soviet Union has always wanted to branch out and spread communism to other countries. And during World War II, as the Red Army moved towards Germany, they took a significant portion of land. And in the process, after the war was over, the Red Army still occupied a lot of Eastern Europe. And the Soviet Union had no intention of giving up its influence and its position in Europe. Stalin saw this as an opportunity to branch out and spread communism like he had wanted to do. The countries you see here in Eastern Europe, and you see this little map is labeled Soviet satellites. The Soviet Union knows that it's weak. They lost a lot of people. Their military, even though it won, still took a difficult hit. And so they want what they call satellite nations, nations that revolve around it, meaning that the Soviet Union will have strong influence in all of these countries. These will be communist countries after the war is over. Stalin understood that what he wanted to do was have these as buffer states. He thought that if Western Europe or a capitalist country or Germany or anyone in the future would ever try to invade the Soviet Union again, these states would be kind of a stopgap measure to keep them out while he and the rest of the Soviet Union prepared for an oncoming war. All right, so this has a lot of purpose for Stalin. So The Soviet Union wants to protect itself. It knows it's in a weakened position. It wants these countries to be communist, and they have no intention of letting the United States have this level of influence. Okay? By the same token, the United States has its own ideas. After the war is over, they quickly demobilized. The American people wanted their troops back home. They wanted to get back to life as normal as they knew it. And so the United States government has a different role in mind. They didn't feel like they needed to have as many conventional weapons, meaning like troops, machine guns, tanks, airplanes. They were going to focus on building up a nuclear arsenal. With a small conventional military still in Europe and a strong nuclear force, they thought they'd be in good shape. Plus, they also wanted to emphasize the role of the United Nations. Okay? The United Nations is supposed to be this international peacekeeping group that would do what the League of Nations could not, and the United States would take on a major role in creating this United Nations and enforcing international law. The United Nations, it was formed, one of the things that President Truman insisted upon from the Soviet Union afterwards was that they participate in the United Nations. You can see the building in the background right here, the flag you might recognize. It's got a globe from atop the world there, so it's not emphasizing one nation or one continent, but the big plain-looking, rectangular-looking building in New York City is the United Nations building where nations send representatives to talk about problems and concerns and try to solve problems without blowing each other up or launching into another war. All right? So establishing the United Nations is what the United States wants to do. They have an optimistic outlook for the world. They've defeated the Nazis, and they want to get back to life as usual. All right? But there's some other issues to be settled. What are we going to do with the land that we conquered? One of the things in particular that the United States and the Allies insisted upon was that Germany would be divided into 4 distinct zones. You see that the United States got its zone down there in the orange. The French-looking section in a little bow tie is a blue section. Britain has a section as well, and you see the Soviet Union as well. You also see inside the red sector where the Soviet Union where the Red Army had gotten to, the city of Berlin was divided up into 4 sections as well because it was the capital city. And so each nation got its own portion of the capital as well. So they divide that up, and the whole goal was to at some point reunify Germany back together as a country that was based upon a peaceful approach to the world, and they wanted to continue with denazifying the area. So Germany is going to be divided into 4 zones. Each country will administer one of those. Korea was also going to be divided. Remember, Japan had invaded Korea a long time ago, and during World War II, even though the United States dropped atomic bombs on Japan, and the United States was the sole country to occupy Japan, you still had the issue of Korea and what to do. Remember, Russia sees this as an opportunity for taking a country that they wanted a long time ago, and so the United States and the Soviet Union agreed to divide North Korea and South Korea. North Korea would be a communist government under the influence of the Soviet Union, and South Korea would be under the influence of the United States and other democracies, but it would be a free and democratic society. We also had a number of other unfortunate events that we're going to get to in our next video that are going to cause turmoil between the United States and the Soviet Union, and we'll get to those next time around.